Namaste. Following the session of Introduction to Sri Aurobindo's philosophy, his teaching, the outline of integral yoga, we will continue with the practice of Sri Aurobindo's yoga in this session. Usually, the practice should begin with some kind of study. One should know where one is entering, what one is going to do for the next or the rest of life. This is not the case with everyone. Many people have some experiences, or they are appealed by something, by some ideal, and their practice with some kind of spontaneity. One loves the mother, one wants to manifest a higher life, one joins a work voluntarily to give a hand and falls in love with the work. And depending on what is one's personal involvement in life, one is a worker type, one is a devotee type, one is a knowledge type person. One starts one's yoga. But generally speaking, to have some overview is a good idea. Secondly, Sri Aurobindo has said that it is the role of this yoga not to mix influences. So if one is already having practice of a particular yoga and one continues that and still wants to join with Sri Aurobindo's yoga, one should think twice. There is a reason Sri Aurobindo says one should not mix up influences. He gave an example in very few words that he was referring to someone, we do not know much about it, but he is writing to a disciple that, for instance, that person joins in with the devotion, his vital being gets active with devotion in the process. So it may be good for the other yoga where the devotion is so much important, where the vital involvement is so much important. But for this yoga, for the integral yoga, the vital has to be purified first. Vital has to be purified of its own personal drives, preferences, so much of ego and ignorance. Ignorance in spirituality means that when the consciousness is focused on a part and wants to derive complete knowledge of things from that part, it is ignorance. So much of ignorance and so much of impurity, if it is not first overcome and vital being gets involved, active, then the devotion will be giving the person a lot of joy, but joy will not be stable. It will break the nerves, it will make person erratic, restless, singing, dancing, crying, withdrawing from work, unwillingness to think deep, etc. will be the features. So it is very important that before beginning the practice of yoga, one is very clear. One can study Sri Aurobindo's yoga as much as one wants, but the practice should not be mixed with other practices. There are practices which activates energies for a particular purpose, like Kundalini awakening, we spoke about briefly in the last session, and that is a high achievement in many traditional paths. But Sri Aurobindo's emphasis is very much on the purification of nature before the energy awakens and joins in further sadhana, further spiritual discipline. So not to mix up influences. Then Sri Aurobindo has given these three means, a kind of a tool which has three limbs: aspiration, rejection, surrender. To aspire for higher life, for contact, for experience of oneness, for experience of the Divine Mother in one's heart, or oneself in the Mother's heart, in one's surrounding, or the Transcendental Mother. Experience of receiving the consciousness descending from above in oneself, experience of Mother's consciousness working in oneself, experience of oneself feeling Mother's protection, being in the heart of the Mother, feeling the blessing hands of the Mother with oneself, a guiding star above oneself, etc. So one aspires for these positive experiences, and aspiration in that way is different than desire. In desire, one wants something not for inner progress but for outer fulfillment, it's kind of a blind fulfillment in the sense that it does not care if other person doesn't get it or the world gets hurt in some way, but one still wants something. And even if it is only for oneself without hurting others, it still distracts, it still takes away energy from oneself. In the long term, holding on to a desire or even fulfilling a desire is exhausting. So, aspiration, the Mother says, is purely a psychic phenomenon. Even the aspiration that is reflected in the mind, in the heart, in the body, etc., are coming from the psychic being, from the deeper being. So, aspiring for the divine presence, for service of the divine, for arranging circumstances in a way that one is naturally drawn towards the Mother, for making it possible for one to concentrate on the Mother or be gladly submissive, putting oneself in the service of the Mother. These are all various forms of aspiration. Rejection is to not give way to any movement in oneself which is not turned towards the Mother, calmly and in a stable way. Rejection is also of all those desires which take one away from one's inner aspiration. So rejection is also, in very practical terms, all those things that one wants to enjoy but are not helping one to grow in the divine presence, including companies, people, friends, relatives, including sometimes and for a short period some works which are not being conducive for one's inner development. Usually the goal, spiritual goal, is that one should be able to do any work with equal delight, equal joy. But as long as one is developing this inner aspiration, inner contact, it is permissible to make light adjustments. It is kind of encouraged to make one's psychic environment, keep the books that helps one grow in the inner consciousness, watch the movies, meet the friends, make a friend circle, study circle, which is helping one to grow in the consciousness. More the inner being comes forward, more it chooses what life it wants to live, what type of people or books, etc., one wants to have around oneself. So this psychic being is very personal being. It has to choose, and it chooses, and more it comes forward, it chooses everything, what clothes it wants to wear, what kind of house environment, what color of room one wants. So in some way it is a little particular. And if this outer nature is not purified, then it can also be a little, outer nature can be a little fussy over cleanliness, over particular order of things, about all things around oneself should be in a particular way only, otherwise one is very troubled or disturbed. But one should know that sadhana is about one's own practice, not asking others to help, to cooperate, to adjust. And more one learns this thing, that it is about inner concentration that one is building, less one finds problem outside. And you still need to reject a lot of things before one builds the inner presence, inner contact in a very strong and stable way. So choose a work. Spiritually speaking, one can accept any work that is given, but psychically speaking, one might want to choose a particular work. But again there, because after all, psychic being is a part of spiritual experience. Even in the psychic journey, there are going to be a lot of spiritual exercises. So even if you choose a work, one will need to choose equality with all, choose to be equal in one's responses to all, develop detachment, etc. The psychic being has kind of a double thing. It is detached like the witness being within, but it is also at the same time a channel of the Divine Mother's consciousness. So there is a moment in oneself to choose one person and reject another person. Or after choosing a particular work, one wants to choose another work and another work. Or one wants to find problems with the work or others. And every time this kind of movement rises in oneself, one has to look at it and reject it. So aspiring to serve goes hand in hand with rejecting every movement in oneself that distract oneself from one's orientation towards the divine and divine service. And the last part is surrender. Surrender is normally understood as submission, involuntary giving up, submissive, to become submissive to someone's will. And that is not surrender. Surrender in spirituality is a glad movement of one's being projected or growing in the higher being. So one feels very glad while surrendering. One feels widened. It's an experience of widening of consciousness. One feels more one with the creation, with everything. Especially if there is a focus of surrender, one feels nearness of the one whom one is surrendering to. So In the beginning, all three are efforts and strenuous. It takes energy, aspiring, because as much we believe that real aspiration comes from the soul, the fact is that for a long time it is only mind and heart and bodies also in some way where it is reflected, and these instruments take on themselves to aspire or reflect the aspiration. So it just takes time to purify this nature and come to that inmost aspiration. But over time, this aspiration becomes a friendly call. One is so much in contact, inner contact and inner communication with the presence, with the divine, that effort reduces over time. One becomes more and more spontaneously in contact, and on one hand the faith grows, the reliance grows, the understanding grows that divine is already doing everything that is required for me and for the world, and on the other hand there is inner clarity grows of what is to be done next, what can be done better, and with that growth of inner clarity, a kind of manifestation of higher will takes place from within. So the aspiration becomes a very friendly call, a reminder, or even a communication with the divine. Same way, rejection is an effort, it's a strenuous thing, and when especially the vital being, it's about dynamic energies. It brings us interest into things. It gives us expression in life. When that vital being is not purified of ego and ignorance. So ego is that separative experience, a creation of mind, a capacity of mind to limit the experience and allow us to focus on that delimited area of our concentration. A very helpful, very practical thing, when it grows into itself, when it becomes a stronger individuality, one experiences it as a separative individuality, which is very different than the inner soul's individuality, which is a connected individuality, which experiences itself as a center of the totality. So this separative person ego, creation of mind, and ignorance, which is also a feature of mind. And in fact, it is the ignorance which results into ego. So with that comes so many impurities like lust, anger, greed. So when these things are active, rejection becomes very difficult. One says that I am going to talk nicely to the person. One starts talking and anger comes out. One says I am going to be treating everyone equally, but if the equality is not inside established in the outer nature is of course very much active with inequality, then you may have a good inspiration and you may start doing a good thing, but the outer nature will take over and it will spoil the work, spoil relations, etc. So above all, it will not allow one to be established in the inner experience of inner poise, inner detachment, or inner perception, which allows one to see things clearly and then call in higher energies to do some work. But over time, rejection turns into samatha, equanimity. So one doesn't need to reject something or anything, because everything is a touch of the divine, a blessing of the mother, a deliberate, a conscious arrangement. There is nothing to run away from, there is nothing to reject, because everything is the play of the divine. So this is the second feature. And the third, surrender, because more one grows in spirituality, more the inner identification grows. So surrender results in some kind of identification, also becomes a spontaneity. One still gives through works, through movements, thoughts, feelings, everything. But it's on a very different level. So it becomes very integral and very natural, and it's not to someone else as it is to one who is very close and intimate and everywhere, and everything is a play of that, something like that. Then about the moderation of practice. So the normal spiritual practice in Sri Aurobindo's yoga is to stay gradually more and more focused in the mother's consciousness, to think of her, to love her, to call her, to pray to her, to do everything with that remembrance of the divine, and with that feeling that she is here, the mother is around, mother is watching me, whatever I do, whatever I think, whatever I feel. And this is a very slow experience to develop. In the beginning, when you say you work like this, you talk like this, you think mother is there, what we are really saying is activate your mind, put your mind into this, let not mind run away here and there. And with all these exercises, develop the experience of the mother's presence and mother's consciousness around and all. So it's a very long, time-consuming process. It's easy because most people, when they start spiritual practice, they are blessed with some experience. Something is given to work with, to build on. And then one may think that one is having a great spiritual experience, or that every day one should have something like this, great experiences, one should develop a lot, one should be able to help others. But those who have really grown in consciousness, many senior people of Sri Aurobindo's circle, they will tell you that it's a very slow process. If you want big experiences, then it's not in this yoga you will get them. So to build slowly, much more important is to build a basis of peace and purify the nature, and have the faith that this is all that is really required. Turning towards the mother, to be quiet, peaceful, and purify the nature. So the receiving of the mother's consciousness is towards this purpose, not towards receiving high experiences and commands to do work in the world and work with others, with these commands and things. All these are given for one's own inner work, inner purification. In the outer approach to the world, one has to be very humble. So, when people come to spirituality, young people especially, they expect a lot of development. And many people, even after coming to Sri Aurobindo's yoga, at some point feel that they want to go to other teachers, other gurus, or some seminars, some sessions, because they find that some things are helpful to them to develop the experience. So it is difficult to say anything on this. What we can say is that at least in the beginning, and as much as it is possible, until there is a very clear inner perception of what is right and wrong, until one is established in the mother's experience, one should not mix influences. Of course, one point comes when one is more identified, one is free. So the discipline is not textbook discipline. Discipline is what comes from within. One has to be very careful, very careful. Okay, I've been talking a lot. Anyone wants to ask something? Any particular aspect of what I said? True, very true, very true. So it's true for all of us that so the moment requires that you are living in that presence, that being, in inmost being. That is how one can deal most spontaneously with the moment. And that is one of the high achievement of spiritual practice, to be able to live in that moment. So usually one is kind of toppled. One is not really perfect in one's expression, but one can step back. So over time what happens is that after getting a lot of beating, you start catching up. So a particular thing happens and a sudden reaction comes from oneself and one reacts on that. And then after some time one realizes, maybe after 1 hour, maybe during the night or after a few days, that was a wrong reaction. Then one builds on the knowledge that came, what one has learned, or one goes to the inner place, or samadhi or mother's photograph or inner, one puts that entire situation again in front of the Divine Mother and ask her how one would react in the right way. That itself doesn't mean that one gets the correct answer right away, but one comes a step closer. And then many steps like this, more sincerely you keep referring everything to the Divine Mother. More your spontaneous outer nature's reaction becomes purified. More you offer your works, your willpower, your actions to the Mother, more your will, your actions become purified, tuned to hers. But what is done above all and at all times is that whatever your level of knowledge or inner perception, spontaneity of heart, etc., or body language, you offer it to the Mother at every moment. You connect with the Mother. You say, I'm not smart enough to do the right thing. You see, I'm not in that proper consciousness. I'm restless. My nerves are vibrating, or I have not taken rest. I have not eaten in whatever way, or simply that I am not experienced enough. I don't feel your presence when I am doing this thing. But I offer it to you. And this is a matter of karma yoga, where you are calling in other powers. But this is the case also with all the sides of yoga, where in the beginning you are kind of groping in darkness. Knowledge-wise, you do not know. Love-wise, the feelings are mixed, everything. So one has this faith that on the other side is she, and she is taking care. That even when I say on the other side, actually this side is all arranged by her. So that is the process slowly to develop discernment of what is right and wrong. To accept that one is necessarily ignorant for a long time, and until that spontaneity comes with a purer experience of being, consciousness, light, joy, energy, and harmony. One is not fighting against something. One is expressing that inner harmony. You know? So that is the way one builds discernment slowly. Now, whether one is aspiring for something or desiring for something, that discernment, is that what you are asking?
Yeah, like even if one's aware, even if I'm aware of that situation, and I do withdraw, come back into within myself, question. There are certain residual emotions that don't move away so fast. But I understand that everything could be surrendered to the Divine Mother. And I think that
right. So
would be, and surrendering would be actually having a dialogue with her and really keeping her in the heart space. I mean, yeah, to practice, I would try that.
So surrendering becomes easy over time when one understands the meaning of surrender. Sanskrit is samarpan. Sanskrit is samarpan. So kind of equal, just proper offering. So I give myself to the Mother, but she also gives herself to us.
Any instance, any personal experience if you like to share where that was a total turnaround for you, you came from a certain minimal understanding or ignorance, you surrendered to the mother, and the moment took you by surprise. Do you have any instance you'd like to
I
share?
mean, there are moments of
Yeah.
moments of grace, not necessarily because one did something that it happened. One has to always do something. Sri Aurobindo says it is the practice that prepares one for receiving grace of the mother. So one has to practice. But there are, of course, going to be moments where she comes close and bridges the distance, and you feel that experience of separation erased. You feel part of her joy, part of her consciousness. And more the experience of the mother's presence grows, more the surrender becomes natural. More one understands that one is not losing something, one is actually gaining, one is becoming part of a larger experience. So what you have to surrender is this limited individuality and its movements, good and bad. Because we think that, okay, I'm doing some work for the mother, so I should offer it to her. But there are moments in me which are too dark and ugly, and how can I offer such things to the mother? So, but it's kind of an illusion to see things as good and bad on our level. So all our moments which requires tuning with the mother, good and bad. And from a very larger viewpoint, there is nothing like good and bad. So we just have found an orientation, a point or a phase, and which is going to release us in the infinite, so where all things are in balance and in proper proportion. So everything has to be offered to her, and not to miss offering anything to her. So what you call offering in the beginning is, after some time, it's just connecting. You see? So one can put a flower with a lot of effort and ritual and nice design and everything, or one can also give a flower with inner sincerity without going through outer formalities. And ultimately the inner sincerity matters a lot. One can be very formal in the outer ritual and not have the inner focus. But one can be also very casual in the outer and have very clear inner focus. So with practice, the experience of the mother's presence grows, and what you call surrender becomes very easy and natural and joyous. So one gladly merges in that higher experience without losing one's smallness. Or you can say one loses one's smallness, one does not lose one's individuality, one gains a larger identity, while this individuality remains as a glad servitor of this largeness at the same time. But then one also recognizes that each person is a different aspect of that. Not that everyone has realized that, but then people are on their way to realize. So from that viewpoint, then when one approaches people and things, one is also kind of invoking that in them. So surrender brings in a lot of joyous play inside and outside also. As you work with people, you also see the play of the Divine Mother, of her grace, of her multiplicity, diversity, of her different levels and different statuses, different aspects. So this is another thing, not to expect very hi-fi experiences and very fast development. But because Sri Aurobindo has given a very big aim, very vast aim, it is understood that it takes time to reach the goal. If the goal is to discipline one element of nature, work with one chakra, one center of consciousness, and purify the passage, withdraw within, and then shoot up in the transcendental, it's going to take less time, less effort. But if the goal is to bring that higher experience in all the parts of nature, bring peace, bring stability, harmony, and invite that experience to come more and more, naturally it is going to take so much more time. But what happens with time is that the being starts tuning into sadhana. In the beginning, almost everyone is kind of preparing for sadhana, for spiritual discipline. In the beginning, it's not really sadhana, unless one has already done some preparation before. So one has interest and orientation in one part of nature, and which is fine and which is very good even. So whatever element of nature is already in the is active, is in one's frontal personality. One is intellectual person, one is emotional person, one is physical person. One starts with that. It can be one's instinct, it can be one's guidance, it can be one tries out in whichever way one starts, and keeping in mind that other parts of nature have to join in at some point, or take up some kind of work where things keep combining. Usually with instinct and with the grace, one finds out one's right work, one's right environment, and slowly puts oneself into sadhana. But even there, for a long time, it just takes time to tune into real sadhana, where one is fully focused on the divine in all things every time. So we have to just accept that we are too full of human nature. So let us try our best, but not bother with what we are not able to do and what is one's shortcoming. More one does, more the tuning starts happening, surrender, inner experiences, progress, all keep happening. And if, as long as one is observing that one is growing a little at a time, it should be fine. And after some time, when the purification is done to large degree, when various parts have been integrated in the process of sadhana, speed comes. This is how I say is that suppose you want to become Mr. Universe bodybuilder. So you cannot afford to do only biceps. You also do traps and thighs and chest and everything, right? So when you do only biceps, you get tired. You do it for like 2 hours, 3 hours. Then you get tired. For a week you cannot do anything. Or you only do half an hour every day and then build on it. But if you do 10 minutes of biceps and 10 minutes of traps you do, or you do chest you do, or 10 minutes of this, you do overall exercise of 1 hour instead of half an hour, plus you include rest, plus you include hygiene, good nutritious food. So overall body starts developing. Similarly, there are various elements. You do some reading, then do some work, then do some devotional movement, or go to nature, look at flowers, play with children, play with animals. Gradually come to a work where you can combine all these activities. So then what happens is that integral participation takes place more and more. And speed comes in the sadhana which you couldn't expect if only one part of nature was being disciplined and progress was being made. So more progress. So Sri Aurobindo has mentioned this in a letter that in the later stages, it's a very rapid progress and very strong momentum of inner forces, inner working out. But for a very long time, one should go very slow. Not only things will happen slow, one should remember that one is going to go slow. Some experiences, some powers come, one offers to the mother, not think about using them, or use only for the inner work and continue growing. Then about being depressed, facing difficulties, etc. So as long as one is putting oneself in this mind frame that I am not in hurry, that I am focused on purification of nature, on calling down the mother's peace, even that I am not going to pull on the force and being impatient to for the force to come down, mother's consciousness to come down all at once or in a few days. As long as one is focused on moving gradually, one is on the right track. And then the depression and the feeling like one is alone and all the negative thoughts are not going to overpower oneself. So as long as one's aims and expectations are moderate, one's practice is moderate. Practice moderation means that the traditions tell you wake up so much early and then sit in meditation and sit in particular position and do this and do that. Or sometimes your colleagues, your sadhaks near you also tell you some things. But it is not natural to oneself to wake up so early, eat a particular type of food, sit in a particular position. So one starts with what one can do, and often what one can do is also one's way. Like yogasana may not be way for everyone. There may be aerobics, there may be weight training, there may be martial arts, running, walking. Whatever helps one to grow in physical consciousness, one has to do. Not to keep to this type of ideals that only certain things has to be done to grow in a certain way. So listening to this moderate voice coming from within, doing the things moderately, not to, in the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna speaks about not to sleep too much or too little, not to eat too much or too less, and such things. Any exercise should be done moderately also. Meditation, moderately. Work, also moderately. But work is a thing where there is some emphasis in Auroville. Mother speaks about Auroville is a place for Karma Yoga of Sri Aurobindo, where yoga of knowledge and yoga of devotion is integrated. So, apart from one's office work, one also incorporate all the life moments as mother's work and bring their knowledge and devotion. Knowledge in the sense that one contemplates higher laws of living, thinking of how one can serve the mother in all one actions, how one is doing things that pleases the mother. Will this be mother's way? Or what will be the right way of doing things? Normal day-to-day activities or normal works, one brings in this knowledge aspect, as well as the love, devotion, remembering the mother's, the divine's face, her name, her consciousness, her experience, some way of associating with her, offering to her, inwardly exchanging energies with her, etc. So this moderation is very, very important. Okay. Then self-evolving yoga. So one creates tools, means, practices for oneself, or one finds, or one studies, or one comes upon, or one is inspired to a mantra, a practice. One goes early morning on the terrace and looks at the sun. In the evening, relaxes under the sky, works 2 hours in the garden. Something that helps oneself for a period. After some time, one realizes that some other part is asking for some development. So one drops that and accepts new practice, or develops, creates new tool that helps oneself. So more and more one is in contact with the mother's presence. This inner spontaneity comes, inner knowledge comes of what way to go forward. Then there is an entire emphasis on silencing of mind. So there are two concentrations in Sri Aurobindo's yoga. One is to find the inner divine presence, by this exercise and in one's relation with the mother, one finds one's own inner soul, one's unique aspect of the divine, or where the divine becomes unique in oneself. One's way of approaching life as well as appreciating divinity everywhere. One's way of creating and contributing to life. The other is to concentrate above. One learns to ascend to the higher planes of consciousness, but much more importantly, calls down the mother's consciousness from above. In other words, or from a certain viewpoint, this process can be seen as growing in silence. So normal way of mind is to gather information from everywhere, put together, create some picture of reality, some idea of reality, and build on them, and memorize, hold some conclusions, and then gather new information, go back to the memory, open the drawers, match, identify, associate, build a larger structure of knowledge. This is a normal process which is noisy, which is restless, and wasteful. But spirituality speaks about higher planes of consciousness where knowledge is already existing, and when the mind turns upwards and realizes that knowledge is already there, it becomes quiet, becomes receptive, and turns more upward in more silence. So the mind's process of gathering information itself relaxes, becomes instead open from above to receive. At the same time, higher knowledge comes from above in oneself. Silence comes, light comes, love comes. All the richness of oneness, directness of knowledge, intuition, etc. One grows towards greater directness of intuition or more wideness of this area of knowledge. So one can say it is about growing in silence. Silence of mind, our outer nature also can be seen as a part of mind, as an expression of mind or activity of mind. So the mind becoming silent brings so much silence to our emotions, to our nerves, to the entire physical being also. One feels more and more what process takes place in one part of nature from wherever one is starting the sadhana. Say one starts with mind, usually that is the way one opens upwards. One sees the same type of process with different parameters particular to particular nature, repeated in different elements. So as the mind becomes turned upwards and opens to the higher consciousness, one sees heart also turns towards the mother's consciousness, towards the higher consciousness, learns to call down. Same way for the senses, for the body also. So repetition, but with a different translation depending on which part is entering the process. So gradually the silence grows in the being. One is more and more turned upwards, more and more directly connected with knowledge. Intuition grows. Intuition can also come through heart, through body also. One can directly feel things without going through information gathering. And efficiency of will also grows. So traditionally one is asked to grow in the higher experience, but in this case, in the Sri Aurobindo's yoga, the higher experience comes down to the normal nature and comes down to the lower and lower nature. So over time one feels the pressure of the descending force in the lower parts, not only in the mind, right, as in the beginning, but in the emotions and ultimately also in the body, to accept the truth, to accept the harmony of the divine, etc. Okay. Question?
You mentioned the acceptance of truth.
The
Acceptance of truth, that was the last sentence. Acceptance of the truth eventually.
Okay.
So, is the possibility of, when you're accepting the truth, the process can actually be quite difficult on the body also?
So we do not have...
Especially as this is it is a time-oriented process, and as one gets older, it's the body that sort of starts showing, in some ways, the difficulty of keeping the focus, keeping the awareness. So, and when the recognition starts happening at the later part of life, there's a lot of, when the truth is revealed, when one starts seeing the truth and accepting it, would be sufficient turmoil to, it could be represented with a certain turmoil and also
chaos theory.
Yeah.
So possibly that is one way of saying that. So what we have is correspondence of early spiritual practitioners, disciples with Sri Aurobindo and Mother, who speak about their inner processes and they answer. But as the time would have it, it's not of the body level but much. So the experiences are on more psychological level because that is the level of us, human beings. In the case of Mother and Sri Aurobindo, they are on the body level. But Sri Aurobindo has not much written, spoken about it. The Mother has, in the Mother's agenda, in her later works. There is a lot of her own record of how the work goes on in the body. But other than about this turmoil, so Sri Aurobindo had spoken about this, that so there is this descending force that works in a particular way. It's a conscious force, more than our normal level of energies, right? It's more connected with the self-experience. So it is more conscious, more dynamic, more creative. It works with us, with our nature, finds out how we respond. It takes different lines, it steps back, starts different way, you see. And this So what happens is that one starts from the psychic being, and one aspires for higher interference, higher descent, higher grace, and of course one is looking upward, one is projecting oneself in the higher ascension of consciousness with the will, with the intention, or with the prayer to call down the higher. So with the growth of consciousness, with growth of experience in sadhana, one learns to call down from higher and higher plane of consciousness. Just think that silence grows, clarity grows, knowledge grows. See? So one is able to naturally call from higher something. I am able to explain. But the nature, when it is purified and more integrated, it can also invite from greater heights.
And you said it starts from the psyche.
Sorry?
It initiates from the heart, the psyche.
In a way, everything. There is something called grace or higher action. For the most part, even that comes in the inner being and comes from here. So, this is something surely and mother should answer, not for me to say. But generally speaking, the aspiration, etc., comes from the heart.
Yeah, because I've also, my experience is that it's a lot of intellectual space. This occupies in the discussions, and it almost stays in the intellectual space. The feeling space is quite different, where actually there's silence. Or the intelligence is used to just to relate to the experience, or to just bring or speak about the experience rather than subjecting it to an intellectual discussion and knowing, and so that space, I mean, for me it takes up a lot of space when in these discussions, and therefore it sort of tires. But yeah, I've experienced the psychic level. It's kind of comfortable here. You have the ability to listen more, and but yet that's not the common. Usually it takes more intellectual space than the psychic space, as an experience for me in Auroville. Maybe that's how I've sensed it, which is good.
That is your question?
Yeah, good question.
Okay, you are sharing. So the lower and lower nature is taken up in time by the descending higher consciousness. So what takes place in the mind takes place in the heart, in the body, etc. Okay. Anyone wants to ask something? So the final thing is how to stay open to the mother all the time, and how to extend the sadhana from our inner works, inner meditation, contemplation, going to Matri Mandira Samadhi, to normal works, and also during night time in sleep. So one thing Sri Aurobindo said is that if the daytime you focus on certain thoughts, then that will be over time affecting your nights also. So all you have to do is take care of your day, and it will be extended in the night. But if the daytime mind is drifting or focusing on some thoughts, etc., and then nighttime it is kind of more exaggerated, then one has to know that there are weaknesses in the nature. The mind keeps on going in certain directions, and in the night time it is just reflected. So what happens is that if the mind tries to sit on energy movements, then in the night time, like a revolt, those energies are rebounding. So there is a harmony of each element of nature, and if one is suppressing movement of a particular part of nature, then also it is very likely that nighttime it will show. For instance, one is a very dynamic person, physically active, vitally active, loves to be in relation with people, talk, share, exchange. But one spends time in meditation and reading all day. Then night time it is very likely that one will have very dynamic experience of night, a lot of vital activities, unruly activities, etc. So if one is suppressing something during the day, then night time it will show up. But if one continues suppressing for a long time, then also what can happen is that that particular dynamic element of nature loses air, loses energy, and gives up. Then one may not feel nighttime the activity of this other part, but overall one will feel less energetic. So it is important to integrate one's nature and extending the sadhana, the inner works, also in the night. So what is night is that this individual mind, our willpower, our what we call my individuality, kind of withdraws, retires. And what rises is our general individual subconscious stuff, but also at some point the individual's subconsciousness joins with the collective subconscious. So if that kind of night one wants, then one can also lose whatever one has gained during the day in the night. So what one wants to do in sadhana and spiritual discipline is to put a veil in the day and at the time of sleeping, so which extends in the night. So at the time of sleeping, many people will read some books of Mother and Sri Aurobindo or some spiritual works of great masters, or do some concentration on the mother's photograph or flowers, or do something gentle, nice, listening to devotional songs, look at a nice movie, watch a nice movie, or do something creative which is not exhausting, be in a good company, etc. Put incense stick and extend and put a veil, call the mother's presence, mother's consciousness to come to one's nights, one's dreams, protect oneself, etc., etc. And apart from this vital and mental protection, one also calls for physical rejuvenation, bringing one a deep peace, deep strength in the body, make one ready for the next day for her service, etc. These are various aspects of mother's yoga's practice. In Auroville or in the Sri Aurobindo ashram or in a place where there is collective yoga taking place, apart from individual participation, one also aims to bring some consciousness to collective unit, collective being. So a better way of relating with each other, accepting each other's ways and encouraging each to follow one's own way, finding a collective solution or collective environment where everyone can grow together. And when everyone is of this type of inner aspiration, it's even better, then it's very nice. I believe I'm covering. Suppose the ultimate practice is to keep up with the mother, learning to be with the mother's presence, to love her, to talk to her, ask her to walk with you, offer the food to the divine presence in the heart, whatever one eats, whatever one does, whatever one thinks, feels, offer to the mother in all ways, in everything, at all times. Exchange energies with the mother. One can also do concentration of growing in consciousness. To do anything with focus, with intention, with concentration helps one grow in consciousness. If I am doing work physically, I grow in physical consciousness. If I do work mentally, I grow in mental consciousness. But to combine all the works, all the efforts, it requires a greater effort and takes longer time. But when one is also focusing one's consciousness on the mother and asking for her help, developing the experiences, working with oneself during the day but also during the night, when one is consciously trying but also when one is forgetful, it helps a lot, it helps a lot. So growing in consciousness and growing with the mother, this personal concentration, and in practice, especially in real life, if one makes some arrangements, some centers of consciousness in life, one can keep a regular hour, a regular moment for concentration, for inner work, for reading works of the masters, for doing one's puja or cleaning, whatever creativity one likes to do, but one fixed hour where one is especially focused on the mother, on the divine presence, or on the inner works. It's very helpful. So then what happens is that suppose you are used to concentrate at 6 p.m. in the evening, then you I just on the side, did I talk about this last time? About making this center of consciousness in time? No. So at 6 o'clock you are used to concentrate, and then one day you are in a party and things are flying and it's very noisy and very extrovert life is there and activities, and suddenly it's your time for this inner work and meditation falls on you and you are inwardly concentrated and you see a completely different life within the normal outer restless life. You have a different vision because you made a kind of contract with the universe that at this particular moment you are inwardly connecting with the divine. So the universe joins in helping you, reminding you, coming to you, showing you a complete different life within the normal life. Same way, apart from regular time, one can also make a special spot in one's house, for instance, or office, a room, or a chair, or one asana, or just a cloth piece, where one sits regularly and does the concentration. This time is, this particular place, a chair, let us say, or a room, is given for inner concentration only. And once you do it for some time, then you find that one day you come back from office very tired and you are not able to do any inner work, but you come to this chair and you just sit there, and without your effort, energies starts flowing into you, and you find that inner work is happening all the same, even if outer is not able to participate or make any conscious effort. Or a conscious person comes to your house and comes near this room and feels these different energies and gives you this compliment. There is something very special here. I feel very inwardly soothed, very feel comfortable. So one can make arrangement with the divine at a fixed hour or in a fixed place, or take one's chair wherever one goes. But just the way of saying that regularity in any way will be very helpful. And the ultimate thing is that to be able to live with the mother, this requires practice and this requires some development, but there is nothing more than this. It puts you on a path to perpetual progress. You can joyously, difficulties will be there, but you can rather easily overcome them. You have a company to communicate everything, refer everything to. And any situation of life you can deal with more and more spontaneously if you are carrying the mother's presence in the heart, and the nature has become quieted and done upwards. It's called surrender or connected. So this is ultimate. With this, everything becomes very, very real, very, very natural, joyous. It's called sunlit path. So one walks in the light, and this is our aim. This is what is given to us by Sri Aurobindo Mother, and we have to aspire for this. So this, I would say, let us do it with more interest into it. Okay. Anyone would like to ask something? So then, thank you very much for coming. Namaste.